When the weeds and the wheat are indistinguishable, what do you do? We live in a time in which more and more, or maybe I should just say, the older I get, it seems that there are wildly varying standards of judgment when it comes to matters of discernment. What's right, what's wrong, what's good or bad, what's a weed, and what is wheat. What stays? Should something be uprooted? So many ethical implications for those wanting to live faithfully and according to God's word. Jesus helps us to push into this tension about knowing right from wrong, good from evil. He tells us a story about a man who wakes up one day to find that the wheat in his fields has been sown with weeds by an enemy. That sounds mean and maybe even like a fairly odd thing to do, but research tells us it was not unheard of in Jesus' day. The word that Jesus used for weed, by the way, is zizania, what we call bearded darnel. It's a nasty thing that can overtake a field and steal the nutrients and the water in the soil. It can choke out every good thing you're trying to grow. And if you eat its seeds on accident, it can give you hallucinations, or it can even be fatal. But it looks an awful lot like regular wheat. And it takes the wheat coming into maturity to know which is which. It's very tricky. Ralph Waldo Emerson posed the question, what is a weed? And then he supplied the answer, a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered. That's how I feel about mosquitoes and liver and onions. Their virtues have yet to be discovered. And I'm afraid that in the case of bearded darnel, we're still looking for its virtues, and unlike Emerson, I'm not holding on to a lot of hope. So return to the question, what do you do when a poisonous and evil thing is hiding among the good things, and you can't tell which is which? When the investment we made had a 30% return that we want to do great things with, but the company that generated it is doing offshore drilling in the Arctic, what do we do? When we have easy access in our world to new clothes and the latest technology, but in order for it to be made, a lot of people are paid almost nothing and work in dangerous conditions all day. When a bill before the Congress or the state legislature has the chance to help people, but in order to do that, it has to hurt some other people in the process. When a reporter has a story that needs to be told, but she knows that by telling it, she could endanger herself or her family. Bring it a notch closer now. Make it as personal as you can. Weeds among the wheat. We all have both of those things in our lives. Sometimes it's hard to tell them apart, but that's why we're here, right? To learn about the tools that God has prepared for us that help us to tell good from bad. Primary tool of godly discernment is first and always prayer. It seems the field hands are ready to go out and pull up what they believe to be weeds until they have the good sense to approach and ask the householder. His response, the advice he gives, is sound. If they don't bother to ask, however, if they only rely on themselves to come up with the answers, well, then they risk bringing the crop and the farm to ruin. It's only a moment's pause in the story, but it makes a huge difference. Another tool for telling wheat from weeds is the benefit of community. The field hands discover the problem together, and they go and they inquire of the master together. In our culture, we love a story about one person, usually a somewhat rebellious type with the odds stacked against them. Indiana Jones, Rocky Balboa, James Bond, or anybody you can think of who was played by John Wayne. And we reserve in our culture the highest praise for the hero, the individual person alone, acting to effect change. But Christian faith, as I understand it, actually charges us to do the opposite. In fact, it is Jesus himself who commands his emissaries to go out 2 by 2. And it is the author of Galatians who exhorts us to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. My own vision, my own capacity, my own reasoning ability, it's all limited. I do not see comprehensively. I'm culturally conditioned. But God sees all, understands all, and has planted fields of golden wheat for us, such good things as surpass our understanding. The simple fact is, I need you, and you need me. We all need each other. Together we make a discerning community. And that takes time. Time is another gift of godly discernment. Note the instruction of the master: don't uproot the crop if it hasn't finished growing. And the promise is that in time there will be wisdom that comes to be able to know deeply the thing that we're dealing with, maybe even before we have to face it. All these are God's good gifts to us when we find ourselves staring out at fields of wheat and weeds tangled up with each other. But the greatest has not yet been named. It is the promise of mercy and grace in time to come. Jesus takes the question of final judgment out of our hands. It is not ours to know or wield, it is God's. And the Lord will render the fullness of things as the Lord will, not as we would. God's judgment will be meted with grace and patience, run through with love and mercy. So what does that leave us to do? Plenty. Following Jesus takes everything that we have: to serve, to love, to gather, and pray, and seek wisdom together, to offer a word of encouragement and hope in a world where sometimes religion is used as tyranny, to supply a slightly alternate way of seeing and thinking. And I believe for a cathedral in particular, to make a refuge, to make a space where it is safe for people to feel connected to God. When it's been a while, maybe, since that's happened, or maybe it's never happened before. And if we do those things regularly and with intention, then certain ethical imperatives will arise in our hearts, and we will know best how to tend the farm of our lives. We will not stall in our efforts to let the fields be overtaken. And prayer will lead to right seeing, and right seeing will lead to right action. Living that way, seeing that way, with God as our guide, it will not be an anxious decision what to do. For we have the assurance of Jesus Christ that he will be with us to love and help us from now until the end of the age. This is just one more definition of what it means to put on the mind of Christ. Amen.